Hello, this is the first in a set of videos that's going to take you through our web design activity 2. And what we're essentially going to do is we're going to use this as an opportunity to learn the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but we're also going to use this as an opportunity to learn how to load some external data and then render it and display it on my web page. Again, how you represent data visually can have a huge impact on the user experience. So this is something we want to think about. What's really important when you finish this is to recognize that I'm just showing you one possible way. You can take the skills here, think about the client that you're developing for or the audience you're trying to engage, and then change the rendering to help that situation. So what we're going to end up with is something that looks like this. Your final product might look a little different. I'm still finishing up those last couple stages, but essentially this is HIV infection rates compared proportionally by country. So what we've done is we've taken the HIV infection rate for every country that is available with data, and we have displayed it proportionally on the given screen space that we have. So there's problems with this representation, and as you go through this exercise, I want you to think about some of the good pieces with this representation as well as some of the problems with this representation. But that said, we'll save that for a little later. The first thing we have to do is we have to set everything up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder and file structure that I'm going to build out of. So you'll see here on my GitHub repository I have activity2t. That's my testing site. That's where I kind of developed this and did all the practice. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new folder. We're going to call it activity2. And I'm going to make a new file, and that new file is going to be called stage1json.html. And then inside that file, I'm going to put a basic HTML template. So let's save that. There it is. And again, we're going to have a couple stages for this, and it's important to break up this project into a couple stages, not for the fact that you're using this in your developing ideas stage, but because it's nice to see the progression, especially as a younger developer. And we're going to title this stage 1 JSON activity. Okay. So now before I actually go any further, we need to actually figure out where we're getting this data from. And where we're going to access the data is from the World Health Organization Global Health Data Network, or something along those lines, the data repository site. And you can find down here a link directly to it. And so I'm just going to kind of jump to that link, which is right here. And what this site has is a whole bunch of data that looks at global health. And you can search it by themes, and you can access it in a variety of formats. We're interested specifically in a format called JSON, which is JavaScript Object Notation. This isn't because it's necessarily the best format. It's because it's a format that you'll come across in this day and age, and it really helps us kind of understand some of the rules around accessing and rendering information on a web page. So you can dive into any of these and pull all sorts of information, but we're interested in specifically the HIV and AIDS data. And what I've done on this page here is if you come down a little bit, you can click here and it will take you directly to where I've pulled the data from. And this will ensure that we all get the same information. For the sake of this exercise, it's important that we're using the same data because of the conventions. And that way you can actually write the same thing and ensure you're getting the same data. So I'm going to download this. You can see I've downloaded this a couple times. And the first thing that jumps out at me is the fact that it's just called data. The bracket just means this is a third version of it in this folder. And I probably want to give it a better title. And since this is estimated number of people, all ages living with HIV, we might give it something along the lines of HIV infection rate or anything like that. The reason why is because it's important that the file name indicates what's in there. So what I want to do though is I want to group my resources. So I'm going to make a new folder inside activity2 called data. And I've used small case, lowercase here on data. I want you to really think about the naming conventions that you use. You'll get lots of different recommendations around naming conventions. The best piece of advice I can give is this. First thing is consider whatever development environment you're working in, because naming conventions can change. But secondly, and possibly more important, is consider the development team you're working on. Because depending on the development team you're working with, they're going to have their own set of rules just to help with communication. So really being aware of that is important. In our case, we're going to keep all our folders lowercase in terms of grouping resources. And now what I want to do is, currently you can see that's empty, but what I want to do is I want to copy that file into there and rename it. So I'm just going to pause this for a second. And now you can see I have the HIV infection .json. And if we open this up, it's a massive file. And you should look at this and notice a pattern going on here. And that's really what we're interested in. What I don't want this to be an exercise in is how to access information in this one specific JSON. We want to understand the patterns and the notation that we use to access it. Because what it means then is that you can use this understanding to access any type of data. Okay, so now we have this, we have our web page and we have our JSON file. So the question is, how do we get our page to read that? And in order for our page to read this information, we have to get over a little hurdle. And that is, web pages that you load can't access resources that are on your computer. So what that means is when I develop my code in here, my script, I can't point it to a file that's local on the computer. And the reason why is because, remember, this is designed to run on people's computers. And there's a huge security concern if you can write a web page and it can access the local file system. So what developers will do sometimes in this situation is they'll set their computer up to simulate a server. And that means you can kind of do testing on your computer. What we're going to do is we're actually going to push this file into our GitHub repository, and then we can access that online location. And that means it's up there and we're accessing an online resource, so there's no security concern. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back to here and open a new terminal at folder, size this, and I'm going to say git space add dot git commit dash m update and then git push. And what I've now done is I've pushed I've pushed all the changes on my repository, but most importantly is now this HIV infection JSON file is actually up in my repository. And I can show that to you really quickly. Go to my GitHub site. There's activity 2. There's my data. There's my HIV infection JSON. So the next thing I need to do now is to somehow set up my web page so that I can access that information. And to do this, we're going to use a built-in, well, not a built-in library, a library that we can access called Jquery. This is a really useful library. A library is simply a collection of code that we can access and use. And what it does is it really just simplifies the process for us. So the first thing we need to do is we have to load the resources of Jquery. And down here, I have a script that you can put at the top of your web page. And I've suggested you put this just above your head, just in your head tag above your title tag. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to come back into Sublime Text here, and I'm just going to paste this up here. So what happens now is all this is doing is when I load my web page is it gets redirected to this website and accesses this jquery.min.js. So this is a JavaScript file. So it's a file that only contains JavaScript code, and it has a bunch of functions that have been written that I can use. And this is what's called a CDN, or a Content Delivery Network. If we come out, we can actually look at the Jquery Cdn, and these are all the different versions you can access on your web page. So there's lots of different versions depending on what you're developing, but if I click the uncompressed, I can get a link to it. I can, if I want, also download this onto my computer or into wherever I store my my web development files. But usually it's better off to go and access it in this way, especially as a beginning developer, because then you don't have to worry about updates. Any update that happens, every time you load the page, you pull this information down. There can be an argument made that this takes time, so it might be better off to store the files locally, but that's not something we really need to get into for now. So what we want to do is we want to test to make sure that the jQuery is loading properly. And we're going to simply add some code here. And this is a little code section I've written. And we're going to copy this, and we're going to put it into our file. And where we're going to put it is we're going to put it in another script tag at the bottom, right there. So this is another script tag, and generally speaking, we put our script tag at the bottom of our body tag. And again, there's a couple reasons for this. By putting our script tag down here, it means that any of the rendering we do, which is, any of the elements we produce in our body tag, will actually be rendered to the screen in advance of running the script. So that means as this script is running, we'll actually see what's on the screen. And that's nice as opposed to having this blank screen waiting for something to load and then drawing the elements. The other benefit of putting it down here is that if I have elements inside my body I want to access, I can't do it until they've been rendered. So all this does is it says, take your window, which remember is, the window is the browser window that is active, and it says, on the loading of this window, I want you to run this function. And the function is everything between this brace here and this brace here. And essentially it says, if the current window has access to jQuery. So if it has access to jQuery, I want you to print out, well, not print out, I want you to have an alert pop up that says yay, and if it doesn't, I want you to alert and say it doesn't work. So let's save this, and let's load this and see what happens. And there we go. I have access to jQuery, and now I can use this to access the JSON data. Let's just do one last thing. Watch what happens if I remove this, and I save this now, and now I load this. It doesn't work, because I haven't loaded that external library that I'm going to use. And so we'll just put that back and save it, and we're good to go. And now we're all set up. In our next video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we actually access this data. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Have a great day.